Hello, my name is Laurel Christensen. I'm the Director of Outreach and Engagement with Mindful Materials. I'm also a practicing architect myself. I work as a sustainable design leader and architect at Dyer Brown in Boston, where we do primarily corporate interiors work, some higher ed. So I can kind of speak to the Mindful Materials tool, the Mindful Materials Collaborative from both angles, both as an advocate for mindful materials and as an architect and a specifier myself. So today, I'm going to share a little bit with you about Mindful Materials as an organization, and obviously share our Mindful Materials library tool and demo how that works. So many of you have heard of Mindful Materials, and I know today we're here to learn about tech tools, and a lot of sustainability innovation is really driven by tech. And there's obviously a huge opportunity for tech to enable more sustainable specifications, more sustainable designs, which is what you all are here to learn about. But with mindful materials, I want to share also today why we believe that the key to accelerating sustainability of the built environment is actually in collaboration. So I don't think I need to share, statistics to convince you all of the overwhelming impact the built environment has on our climate, our ecosystems, and our most vulnerable populations. There are a zillion facts and data points to cite about the built environment, and while things like efficient building systems and whatnot really matter, a huge portion of the built environment impact comes down to the materials that are used to create it. I love this quote from one of my colleagues, Jack Dinning at Brightworks. He says, "The impact of the built environment is vast, global, and systemic, and mindful materials exist because drastically reducing the impact of building materials is impossible to tackle alone, and our only shot is working together." So all stakeholders across the built environment kind of represented here are all trying to tackle this issue of sustainability. How do we design more sustainably? How do we reduce the impacts of the built environment? And there are a ton of different ways. There's many different ways to approach this as there are materials that you can specify. It can be very overwhelming to try to sort through all of these different standards and certifications and try to make sense of what you need to prioritize, which certifications are good, which align with your goals, which are greenwashing, what's the difference, and whose job is it ultimately to make sure that you're specifying the right products or looking for certifications that really align with your goals. There's a lot of passing the buck that happens. There's a lot of siloed action. Designers might specify something, but maybe it's the contractor that ultimately has the final say on what gets installed. Is it up to the owner to have had a stronger RFP to make sure that the sustainable materials got into the project in the first place? As you can see, if we're not careful, we're just going to keep passing the buck, and we're not going to see the progress that we want to see happen in the sustainable materials realm. So our vision at Mindful Materials is that mindful materials are clear to identify, easy to find, and the standard for every building. So not just those that are going for third-party certification. A lot of folks are familiar with the history of mindful materials. We started out as a labeling system in HKS's office. These were labels placed on the spine of binders in the library to indicate which products had certain transparency or disclosures or certifications. And from there, it grew into the library that is kind of synonymous with mindful materials today, and something I'll demo. This is kind of our tool that I'll demo for you shortly. But we're really have grown into a movement. This year, 2022, Mindful Materials became a nonprofit advocacy group, and we're really working to shift the market as far as sustainable materials go, and make sustainable materials the norm and not the exception. And to do this, we have an incredible collaboration hub of cross-industry experts and built environment professionals that are advocating for material sustainability. We do this through a collaboration hub, and our collaboration hub is building a common materials framework, which I'll share about in a moment. And all this feeds into a curated and connected digital materials library. So to clarify, mindful materials is not another certification, it's not another standard, and it's also not our intention for our database or our library tool to be a competitor to any other database out there that you're using in your workflows. We see mindful materials as a convener of all these groups, tools, and standards, bringing them all together to amplify the great work that they're doing and translate it to the broader industry so that we can make the selection of sustainable materials more accessible for everyone. The Collaboration Hub is really the foundation of who Mindful Materials is as a by industry for industry movement. We bring together materials experts and people passionate about creating change from all stakeholder groups in the materials space to build resources, grow awareness, and foster change. We could never have the capacity or the expertise to do this work without everyone who contributes their time and brain power to this effort. And our work would be so much less powerful and impactful if we were working in a bubble to define mindful materials. Over the years, we've seen a growing number of public industry commitments that serve as a signal to the market that representatives from multiple stakeholder groups are committing to prioritizing materials with transparency data and ultimately materials that are optimizing their inputs to reduce impacts on these 5 buckets of sustainability. These are the 5 buckets that are defined by the AIA Materials Pledge, and those are human health, social health and equity, ecosystem health, climate health within a circular economy. So what does it mean to address human health, climate health, ecosystem health, et cetera? A lot of firms are making these commitments, which is really exciting to see, but there's still not complete clarity around what that means. Human health and how we specify or prioritize products that reduce the negative impacts on human health might mean something totally different to one firm than it does to another. So this is why we're trying to introduce the Common Materials Framework. The idea of the Common Materials Framework is to essentially map all of the different certifications that fall under these 5 different buckets to make it clear how they meet each of these different goals. So in order to do this, we've assembled a cross-sector advisory board that some of the members are represented here on the left. The AIA is part of this, ASID, Brightworks, the Large Firm Roundtable. Brightworks is our sustainability consultant who is really helping to kind of tie all this together and dig into the data and kind of align it with the 5 buckets. So this content advisory board is meeting every week to really, again, take a deep dive into this data and really interpreting what each of these certifications means, what basically every North American certification means, and how it relates back to those 5 buckets. So this is, again, very much a work in progress, and just a high level look at what this mapping kind of looks like. We like to use the acronym TACO here. So for every product and every data point, those data points kind of fall under the category of transparency documents, assessments, commitments or certifications, and optimization. And so this is what we're mapping. How do all of these tacos relate back to those 5 buckets of sustainability? So the back end of this is very technical, not as sexy and exciting to look at, but it's very important because a lot of firms are spending a ton of their own time kind of creating their own internal databases, trying to parse through all of this on their own, and kind of everyone's reinventing the wheel within their own silos. So that's what we're trying to prevent. So as that Common Materials Framework is finalized, that is all going to filter into this curated digital library. And so in a sense, Mindful Materials kind of becomes the bouncer to the SUSTI club, determining who meets the baseline criteria and what does it really mean to be a mindful material. So let's get into how this actually plays out and how this works within the library tool. And I will preface this by saying that we launched just before Greenbuild of last year, we launched a kind of update to the interface of the library, which is what you'll see here, what I'll show you today. This actually shows the 5 buckets aligning with human health, climate health, social health and equity, ecosystem health, and circularity. In order to access the Mindful Materials Library, you will go to mindfulmaterials.com/library, or you can go to our homepage here and click on the library button. I do want to just give a quick shout out. If you go to the news and blog, our Material Ideas blog, we have a series of blogs, there might be more by the time that this airs, that are explaining the Common Materials Framework and kind of getting into that in a little bit more detail. So I encourage you all to check that out. So When you access the library, you'll need to log in, which I've already done, but you'll create an account, log into the library, and here you see all of the data that lives in the library all at once. So we have currently 13,902 materials. And it's good to know that the information that's displayed here is filtered by the data that's the most content, the most connected, meaning that it's connected directly to the certifying bodies. I'll explain a little bit more about that in a moment. The most current, so not expired. And at this point right now, you can see that shout out to Technion, their district desking system is leading the charge here with the most connected data in the library at the moment. So if you expand these little arrows here, you can see the 5 buckets, and the last 2 on the end, social health and equity and ecosystem health, are currently being mapped as part of the development of that common materials framework. So I'm going to close those, collapse those, because there's no data there right now to speak of. So couple things I want to point out. Within each of these buckets, you'll see a couple columns. So with human health, we really view transparency and reporting, just declaring what's in the product, as kind of the very baseline criteria for entry. Obviously, optimizing and improving the products or improving the chemical content of a material, for instance, to ultimately remove chemicals of concern is going to favor a material a bit more over just having transparency documentation. So that said, when you see that there's a data point here under report, that's just a declaration essentially. And if it says multiple, you can always click there and you'll get a little pop-up and it'll show you what are those multiple certifications. So this is one way to view the data for a product here. When you click on it, like before going into the actual product page, just very high level, you can click here and see what data is related to this product. In this case, we have a declare label, but without even navigating to the label itself and then finding out that it's expired, you can see that this expired in June 2020. But here we have a declare label that's valid until September of this year. And from here, I can just click on the link and go directly to that declare label. The other thing I will show you at the bottom here is a little icon to indicate where this data is coming from. So if it's an M, that means it came from the manufacturer, they disclosed it themselves. R means it came from the reporting body and it's connected directly to that reporting body's database. And O means it came from the Origin Data Hub, which is the parent tech company that powers the Mindful Materials library. So the other thing I'll point out, anytime you see a little question mark here, you can always hover over those and quickly see like a little bit more description on what this means. The last point to note here at high level is if you see a colored star, that means that it is a third-party certification that is current. A gray star means that it's a historic or expired third-party certification. And circle is a current declaration. And then in order to really find the materials you're looking for, you can type in over here, you can type by keyword to search for a product. You can drop down and look for a specific manufacturer. If you're looking for, like, you're working on a lead project and you just want to look for products that are going to help you meet a certain point or criteria under a given building rating system, you can sort for those here. Certifications and standards is where you see all of the different data points or tacos that fall into the library. So you can search specifically by things that have, for instance, a declare label or cradle to cradle. I'll also point out there's a couple integrations that are currently live. One is with EC3 and the other is with Material Bank. So if a product has an EPD hosted on Building Transparency's website, then they can link it, the manufacturer can link it here. So you can click right here on EC3 and actually go directly to the Building Transparency database and access the EPD information there directly from the product listing on Mindful Materials. Going a little bit slow, but you get the point. The other nice integration here is with Material Bank. So from here, I can go directly to Material Bank and actually place an order for this sample directly from the Mindful Materials library. So that's a nice feature as well. And the last thing I'll show you, and just using the same wood flooring as an example, is the product level page itself. So you'll find more information here, and to clarify, the amount of information that you find here is really related to how much the manufacturer has uploaded. Um, Sometimes there's a lot more, sometimes it's minimal. Here for wood flooring, for instance, we probably wouldn't have like a BIM model, but it is possible for there to be BIM models linked here. It's possible for there to be, product brochures, so promotional materials, information about the product, really as much as the manufacturer wants to provide, on top of obviously that transparency reporting and criteria. So um, just something good to know. Also here, for instance, you can see they have a number of their sales reps loaded in. So I always encourage manufacturers, the more info that you can put here, the better. So um, as you start to apply filters, search filters up here, they'll appear at the top. And you can search for multiple things together, and then you can choose to remove one or all of those search criteria. And you'll always be able to see over here at the top right, how many materials are in that search result. So pretty straightforward, pretty easy to use. The one thing I will say, we try to maintain current data and connected data. We want the database to be usable and efficient for you. But if for some reason that you do find there's a link broken, there's a button here to report bad data, and we ask that you please do report that if you do find it. So that said, just jumping back to wrap up the presentation here, I showed a couple examples of how the Mindful Materials library was integrated with Material Bank, for instance, and EC3. But the idea and the intent behind the Common Materials Framework is that it would be connected to really anywhere you're making product decisions, any workflow tools that you're already using. So these are some of the partners that we're looking in the future in 2023 and moving forward to start to connect with. But we'd love to hear from you. Please, send us your feedback. What are the workflow tools that you're using? Where would you like to see that Common Materials Framework integrated? Because I think there's a lot of opportunity there. There's so many complex and overlapping questions and initiatives out there around materials, and many places to look for products, many different values that you can prioritize in your selections, and it's overwhelming to manage all this data. And so our hope is that Mindful Materials can start to help answer that question of where do I start. So thank you all for being here to learn about Mindful Materials, and we look forward to having more engagement with you all in the future.